All right. So finally, we bring to our last read, and I think this is the official reading series for this episode, and it may cause Matt to have a stroke.
Oh, God damn it.
It comes courtesy of, again, another Chapo all-star who we haven't honestly checked in on in a long time, but I think the time has come for her to make another appearance. I'm talking, of course, about Washington Post opinions columnist Megan McArdle.
Oh, God. No.
Probably, I would say, the all-star in the Chapo roster. Like in the Chapo Hall of Fame, I think she's racked up more points
This
than
is
anyone.
Ted Williams.
Yeah. Like Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, and Muhammad Ali rolled together is Megan McArdle.
Yeah.
But instead of sports, it's being right. Having good thoughts and putting them into writing them down and publishing them.
Oh, no.
Okay, courtesy of the Washington Post, Megan McArdle said I was going to talk about affordable health care and the costs of prescription drugs. Megan McArdle. Oh, wait, do you want to talk about Megan McCain and her husband Ben Domino getting mad at Tom Myers real quick? That was a funny thing that happened
That
this
was
week.
funny.
That's when
really convincing. I think acting job of the year, Ben Domino. Sorry, I love my wife. Sorry for rage. I love my wife. I am a huge fan of my wife. Okay, man.
He got so mad at Seth Meyers for being mean to her. I wonder how mad he's going to get at himself for all the times he publicly owned her on Twitter before they got married.
Was it Stefan Heck found one where it was just like a manual RT where it was like someone's like he was manually RTing someone that was like contest, like win a date with Megan McCain, and then he just in all caps, no, do not want.
Yeah, but then he met her, and we all have to admit, I mean, come on.
She's very charming. She's very charming. Yeah.
I mean, they went to a date, and like she screamed at the waiter until her face was the color of a fucking plum.
And then like,
do you think it was like lady? It was like Lady and the Tramp, and instead of fighting over like connecting the same piece of spaghetti to kiss, they're both flagging down the same manager to get the waiter fired and grab each other's wrists.
Ben Domino, though, claimed that Seth Meyers only got his job because he was gargling Lorne Michaels' balls.
Yeah, no,
Lorne Michaels does not have balls.
That's true. That is true. Like, Lorne Michaels saw Seth Meyers, and he was like, I want that sexy bitch to suck on my balls sexually. Not my dick, just my balls.
And again,
it's very weird.
Ike Barinholtz also pointed this out. He's calling Seth Meyers a hack, which is like whatever. Ben Domino got fired from the Washington Post for plagiarizing P.J. O'Rourke.
Hey, he
got fired for plagiarizing a hack.
If you want to, be the best, steal from the best.
Yeah.
P.J. O'Rourke, like, what would you plagiarize from P.J. O'Rourke? Hey, sometimes I like a little alcohol with my politics. Cool.
His awesome column about, like, I think all the hippies should get jobs cleaning golf courses.
Have you ever noticed
That's
that
epic.
French people smell bad?
Dude, hello, Epic Department.
Okay, so this our other favorite Megan, and I think honestly the better Megan, if we're being honest here, Megan McArdle.
Ugh.
There is a high cost to making drugs more affordable for Americans. So, like, now I know, like,
Well, pays $120 for an eighth once.
Well, I mean, it's true. Like, if people had access to medicines, some of them might not die early, and those people might end up being school shooters or Hitler or something. So, that's a cost we have to consider.
So, I mean, Megan is here to tell you that, like, yes, it's become, as a public, we've become increasingly aware of the sort of ludicrous and, like blackmail basically involved in the drug companies can now charge $700 for insulin or something like that. And that there's a growing dawn.
Something that's been synthesized for almost 100 years.
And that, they abuse patent laws to like keep these things from being like, public domain, basically in perpetuity. And, you may think that that's bad. And Megan's saying, you may be right, but like on the other hand, what are the costs of fixing that? It could be higher than you actually dying from diabetes.
What if they try to make insulin generic and then they forget how to make it?
I mean, you're telling me when you go to the supermarket, you want that shitty cereal that's in a bag? What if you start getting prescription drugs that are like, a knockoff of Prozac?
Yeah, you don't want to go into Trader's Joe and get your prep.
Okay, Megan McArdle. Americans' outrage about prescription drug prices is odd in a way. What beautiful opening sentence. Drugs account.
I love a nice declarative, clear statement of intent to begin any article. I always like to begin an argument being like, "Hey guys, I don't know about this thing."
Well, as you're aware, the most infuriating part about Megan McArdle and her writing / thinking style is essentially laundering her hard right-wing point of view through obscene twee affectations and absurd hemming and hawing, where you go on the one hand, on the other hand, and you make it seem like you're being giving a fair-minded representation.
Yeah, just give me Ayn Rand over this shit.
Absolutely.
No, Ayn Rand knew what she believed in and would say that you're a worm if you think otherwise.
It's like if Megan McArdle wrote that shit, it would be like, A kind of equals A, I think, maybe.
But one could see
Who's
a scenario
John
where it
Galt?
equals B.
Who is John Galt? I don't know. People are kind of saying he's a guy.
He's
But is
somebody-
he? I don't know.
I mean, he might be a guy.
It's fun.
I kind of think he's a guy. But
It's
who knows?
weird. Okay, drugs. This is McArdle again. Drugs account for less than 10% of the nation's overall healthcare spending. And while the price of some medicines has spiked, overall spending on prescription drugs has grown more slowly than broader healthcare expenditures. All right.
We did it. Gone back, folks.
We
What's
did
that
it.
about people literally dying because they're rationing their insulin like on the regular?
No, but like,
But there could be more.
what she's saying is like, it's odd that you care so much about how expensive prescription drugs are costing, because the cost of prescription drugs has actually grown far slower and less dramatically than the cost of everything else associated with healthcare,
Which is exploding.
So he goes, in 2017, the increase didn't even keep up with inflation.
Oh my God.
Yet polls show,
I guess all those people aren't dead.
Yet polls show that pharmaceutical companies are one of the most hated private sector
the
industries, below the rest of the healthcare industry,
I don't get it. It's like
and
this-
below even lawyers.
What the heck? It's like this company where they say, "Hey, I need this thing to not die," and then they say $5
Can you
million,
afford it?
and
And then you
literally,
say no.
if you can't afford it, we won't give it to you. It's weird. People resent that industry.
How could you not like somebody who is weighing two things in two hands? One of them is like, will thousands of people die because we just gouge the price on something we didn't invent? And on the other hand is like his kid going to the new school's new mime academy. How could you hate that person?
This is part of
They
Felix's
like- yeah.
ongoing war against New York's The New School.
I don't know. Okay, look, I just think it's emblematic of the type of person. Everyone at the new school, their dad is all Martin Shkreli. It's a long story.
So he goes, she says, that's why it's been such fertile territory for Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders, who in April introduced a bill to control prescription drug prices, and last week tweeted that once in the White House, he would lower the outrageously high price of prescription drugs. The idea has proven so popular that even Republicans, including Senator Rick Scott, are getting into the act. Rick Scott, by the way, if he's getting in on the act, he must have figured out a way that he can steal millions from Medicare recipients directly.
Rick Scott is going to be the first senator sponsored by Big Baller brand. He's a big baller.
Which isn't really surprising at all. Is it, Megan? Drugs may be a small part of our healthcare spending, but it's the cost that we're most directly exposed to month after month.
So it's a big part.
Yeah.
Fucking idiot.
Moreover, it's easy to directly compare U.S. prices with much lower prices in, say, Canada. Yeah, another comparable, like industrialized first world nation that's literally we share a border with, that is in every way like America. That like for some reason their drugs cost a fraction of what we do, and the people literally organize caravans to go north of the border to get fucking drugs. Megan, honestly, Megan would like to build a wall, but on the Canadian border, so Americans can't steal prescription drugs from Canada. So he goes, Americans think the difference is unfair because it is. And yet Americans arguably get a pretty good deal from all this overspending. What they get? New drugs. Okay?
You mean like that shit for like make your eyelids just thicker?
So
like
he goes,
that?
New drugs. We get new drugs. The oversized profits that
15 different types of boner pill.
The oversized profits that pharmaceutical companies collect in the United States encourage them to do lots of research and development in the hope of earning more of those sweet, sweet returns. Again, more of her fucking unbearably twee. Right? She writes like a fucking high schooler. Doesn't she have any editors who are like, this isn't cute or funny, Megan? It's actually grotesque.
And it's really good in there. She says encourages them.
Those sweet, sweet returns. And wait, one more sentence. The rest of the world essentially free rides on Americans' willingness to pay more. Okay.
Willingness to pay.
So yeah, our willingness to pay. Nobody asked us. Yeah. If given the choice, we would actually like to pay less, and that's what this article you're trying to argue. You're trying to talk us out of. In Megan's ideal world, we all would be willing to pay whatever prescription drug.
Those hardworking pharmaceutical reps, they deserve every penny.
Okay, what's so stunning about this?
They gave me a slightly different type of fucking statin.
Is Megan makes a shitload of money, right? I mean, I assume she has like a pretty good salary writing for the Washington Post. And like she gets money in exchange for her willingness to debase herself in public over and over again. What's stunning to me about this line about how actually the American pharmaceutical industry, their profits subsidize medical research that the rest of the world free rides on, is the oldest fucking line in like the Pfizer fucking PR playbook. They've been pulling this for probably 20 years now, and they're doing it again. They haven't changed this line at all. Their profits, it's going all to research. They spend vastly more money on fucking marketing and like stock buybacks.
They spend it on
marketing.
They spend it on pens that have the names of the drugs on it and hand jobs for doctors so that they'll prescribe them.
They spend a fraction of these profits on legitimate medical research. Most of the actual important medical research that leads to breakthroughs are from government-funded
National
research.
Institute of Health. They get... And then
glom onto it
because we have no
add a time release mechanism and then patent it so no one can get that drug for the next 100 years.
Because we don't have any mechanism to distribute drugs or actually to develop and distribute drugs. We have to give the research to private companies just because they have a distribution network, which we could absolutely have that be a fucking public provision as well.
Megan continues here.
And the thing she says, I just want to say it. She goes, it encourages them to put the money into research.
Well, it's obviously not the case.
Well, beyond that, it's like you're just saying that. Like there's no support there. You're saying, well, logically it would. It's the same argument when they say, oh, you cut taxes on rich people, then they're going to put it back into their companies in the form of investment, and that'll mean more jobs. We know they don't do that. We know for a fact they don't do that. But it sounds like something you would do if you were in that position. So you think, yeah, you're right, they do that. But we know they don't do that because also her premise that their money comes from like the next big like life-saving drug. No, their money comes from slight variations on existing drugs.
And addicting the nation to opiates.
Yes. And buying old patents and jacking up the fucking price.
Yeah. This is what I mean. Like Megan, this is what you're taught. What Megan and other fucking reptiles like her are taught at like the Koch brothers Institute for Humane Studies and these journalism programs to get you placed in somewhere like the Washington Post so you can just regurgitate these ludicrous like PR bromides from private industry. What you learn there is how to like anesthetize any sense of shame or feelings that like you're a bad person. Like this is what I said, Megan gets paid to embarrass herself in public because she doesn't care she doesn't give a fuck what she says. Doesn't care at all what comes out of her mouth. She just knows that she has to do it.
She's just thinking about that Williams-Sonoma catalog. She's thinking about putting another fucking gewgaw in her goddamn kitchen.
So she goes on here.
She is Lydia Rodarte Quayle.
She goes on here. If the United States enacted European-style price controls on drugs, less of that research would be done, and that would mean real losses to human welfare. In recent years, drug companies have offered, among other things, a cure for hepatitis C, a treatment for drug-resistant epilepsy, a near-miraculous remission rates for previously terminal cancers. Okay, they invented all those things? Good, let's make it public domain and have it so that everyone can have access to these new wonderful life-saving drugs.
And once again, I want to see the fucking work on where the goddamn research for these comes from, because just because Pfizer patents it or sells it to you or puts a commercial out does not mean that they did the fucking research that made that happen.
She goes, the argument is a familiar one, though, and advocates for some form of price controls already have rejoinders. Probably the most frequently heard is that drug companies can keep research investment high by cutting in other areas such as marketing, dividends, and stock buybacks, and boo-hoo if the shareholders don't like it. Again, that's literally what I just said. So she says the advocate's solution is simple, appealing, and wrong. It fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the drug pricing issue, which is not a budget problem, but an investment problem. A budget problem is what it sounds like. It's how you match outflow to inflow. If your salary drops by a third, you start cutting expenses until you've eliminated the deficit. Farewell vacation, and it may come time to sell one of those cars. But investments are about how you make your income grow. Imagine that you're deciding whether to go into business for yourself. It doesn't really matter what sort of business, but since Tuesday was National Roast Leg of Lamb Day, let's say you want to open a sheep farm. I don't know what the fuck she's talking about here. Here's a good thing. You start with a simple defensible moral principle, which is that no one should die in the richest nation on earth because they can't afford insulin, a drug that's been extant for 70 years now. To create an argument to like sort of reverse engineer an argument against that, you have to come up with this convoluted thought experiment where you're investing in lamb futures because it's roast leg of lamb day, or you're comparing it to a household budget where you're like, oh, if drug companies, cut back on marketing, then, if you think about that like your family, that means that you won't be taking a vacation. What the fuck is she talking about?
Well, it's like the classic Felix tweet where you start page 1 of an economics textbook is the economy is why we have ice cream. Page 50 is, and that's why it's okay that people die in factories.
I'm very proud that Bloomberg or Washington Post. Sorry, I forgot she's no longer.
Yeah, she's upgraded.
Washington Post has hired Dr. William Gohl.
Prescription drug prices. It was the Jews who were the ones who were responsible.
The Jews are not be blamed for nothing. Yeah. But no, she's just she's like leading a trail of breadcrumbs into the enchanted forest, so you could just get lost there forever. Be like, well, yeah, if I want to get a lamb farm, okay, and then what about that extra? What about the car payment? And by the end of it, you just don't even know what your name is.
I have to say, like, McArdle's like affectation, I guess, has worked on me sometimes because it's just like, we really do beat up on this shitty writing so much, and she's terrible. She's just a fucking hapless, like, in her life, she's like a hapless dope. She has like a succession of like partners and husbands who just like play.
She only had one husband.
Well, she had a
it's a gamer husband
before that who
it's
also
the same
didn't
guy.
like her, and then this guy who just plays World of Warcraft all day. And she just wakes up feeling nothing and then panic at that nothing, and all she can do is just like buy mixers or some shit that use like a quartz tip so you can make a finer type of cookie dough or whatever. And it just like, it is sad to see someone's life just so nakedly pointless and they're so clearly unhappy. But then you just read this and you're like, man, she's just fucking terrible. She's such a shit person. She is so dog shit as a human being.
Well, she doesn't care. I mean, remember the Grenfell thing? It's all like horrible things happen. Things that shock the conscience and soul, and make people
needless suffering.
And the thing about that kind of thing is it makes people think, what can we do to stop this? And her job is to get in between you and your outrage and say,
exactly,
no, you shouldn't be outraged about this. And that's her job. That's her fucking job.
Like,
they put that her fucking corn blancher in her fucking.
And you know what,
kitchen
Matt?
with
This is exactly the same move that she does in the Grenfell column, which is like, you have a thing that shocks the conscious, pointless, needless suffering and cruelty that happens because of greed.
Yes.
And no other reason but the greed of private actors.
Capitalist drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Profit, yeah.
She gets in there and says, I know you may think it would be good if we did something about that. But what if I were to tell you that in doing something about that, there's a sort of butterfly effect that will create an even worse scenario that will be lead to even more suffering than what exists now.
No drugs for anyone.
Yeah, exactly. But she goes on here. She says, do you still open the sheep farm?
Shut up.
You could cut the budget and maybe still eke out a living.
Oh, God.
When you're making a new investment, I'm reading this whole thing. I'm reading this whole thing. You could cut the budget and maybe still eke out a living. But when you're making a new investment, the question isn't, how can I make my income match my expenses? But is this the best use of my time and money? Most of us want to do more than eke out a living. If government squeezes the profit out of a business, we're not going to go into that business. We'll do something else. That's how pharmaceutical firms think about research and development, not as something they must do, which they will support by economizing elsewhere, but as something they would like to do if the investment pays better than doing something else, such as executing stock buybacks. It's also how people buying biotech stocks or lending money to pharmaceutical firms think about their activities. And so, if the returns on those investments are squeezed, fewer investments will be made.
It's almost like the fucking profit motive is in direct conflict with human welfare.
How about we just nationalize all pharmaceutical firms and run them as public concerns?
Oh, wait a minute. No, because the only thing that makes people develop new medicines is profit motive. Those scientists in those labs at the National Institute of Health, they've got dollar signs in their head, which is, of course, why fucking Cuba, which has a totally nationalized healthcare system and is also an impoverished island under fucking economic embargo for 60 years, cured cancer or cured AIDS in fetuses and has a fucking a cancer vaccine. They were able to pull this shit together without having an industry that depends on like taking a bunch of fucking like general practitioners from Omaha, taking them out to steak dinners, and then giving them all lap dances at Scores.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and it is a valid point. But imagine, if you will, it was enchilada night at your house. But someone made a little oopsie daisy and forgot to buy the soft taco shells. Now, you could make it with hard taco shells, but if my husband, who hasn't made eye contact with me in 6 months, he forgot where I put my $35,000 tortilla maker, then I just have to completely pointlessly meander through life at the behest of the Bohemian Grove and reptilians. And then I just die a pointless existence, having never really been loved or loved anyone. And then you can't get your enchiladas.
But there's a fundamental conflict. Like, she's framing this of the profit motive is what gives people the incentive to do life-saving work. And we've already pointed out that that's not necessarily true. The Cuban healthcare system comes out with amazing life-saving innovations on a shoestring fucking budget with no profit motive.
The guy who created the polio vaccine refused copyright on it because he gave it away.
The guy who synthesized insulin too also gave it away. He didn't say, I want one day for the disgusting slug daughter of Joe Manchin to be able to buy 16 fucking below-ground pools on a recently mountaintop removed hill in fucking West Virginia. But I think a good example that is even more trenchant to how this is a fundamentally incorrect argument. This idea that profit is what saves lives in the medical world is, people might know this or not, but we are on the verge of getting a epidemic of antibiotic resistant bacteria that could like decimate the human population. Because bacteria have, over the last couple of generations, grown increasingly resistant to existing antibiotics. Antibiotics are becoming less and less effective at stopping infections.
We talked about this with Lee Phillips. It basically means that like not only are most medical like surgeries would be impossible without antibiotics, but like very simple things like catheters would also be impossible without antibiotics.
And the pharmaceutical industry is not doing anything about it because there's no money in it.
Nope.
So this is a case where the profit motive is literally incentivizing
apocalypse.
Yes. Well, it's incentivizing us allowing everyone to die of antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Looks like guys who don't Swiffer their floor are looking pretty smart right now.
Last paragraph.
Oh, thank God.
There's a reasonable argument, of course, that Americans should be willing to forsake pharmaceutical research to make current drugs more affordable. But before going that route, everyone needs to be clear on what sort of decision is being made. Otherwise, it's all too likely that cutting drug prices now in the name of easing people's budgets will mean later discovering that we inadvertently sacrificed the life-saving investments of the future.
Okay, we've talked about why that's bullshit and why her premise is wrong, but right there where she says, what does she say? We're doing it in the name of what about the budgets?
Otherwise, it's all too likely that cutting drug prices now in the name of easing people's budgets.
That's it.
There you go.
That's what prescription drug prices mean to Megan McArdle. Oh, I might have to not get that rice enema machine that I was going to get instead of literal life or death for millions of people, which we know for a fact it is. How many fucking times have you seen a story about somebody who rations their fucking insulin until they die because they haven't been getting consistent treatment for their diabetes? That happens all the fucking time, and people never even get prescriptions filled that they have been prescribed for them because they can't afford it, and then they die. We know that people are literally dying over this. It's not about whether or not you're going to... and she tips her hand too, and she says, well, it's like a household budget. If you cut here, you might not be able to take that vacation, or you might have to sell that second car. Just, that's her baseline, is somebody who's going to fucking... going to Aspen and has 3 cars in the fucking garage, and whose household budget is just this vast array of expenses that she can slowly winnow down in the case of an economic downturn, instead of what it is for most people, which is a fucking razor's edge of life and death, and a thing like a spike in the cost of a prescription is why you die. It's why you die, or it's why you can't do something else that's vastly important to your life and that leaves you completely fucked somewhere else.
I mean, again, like the question that's being posed is not one about budgets. Is, you know, if you like have X, like how much money would you pay to keep living? How much money would you pay to keep your foot? Like, how much money would you pay, like, to, have a livable quality of life? This is the question that our health insurance and prescription drugs in America, in a privatized system, asks people every day. To Megan, because I don't think she's, like, I don't know, a human being.
Not really.
I don't know, not really a human.
She's a really strong argument for the David Icke theory.
Yeah. To her, that's a reasonable question, and that you could create a graph actually that could chart out like where your sweet spot is between like living a decent life, living a life that's brutally prescribed by chronic illness that would otherwise be treatable, but also you want that jet ski or whatever. She probably has like formulas and graphs that she thinks represent like a logical way to figure this out. But at the end of the day, she knows this is all bullshit, but she knows it's her job to write it and put her name on it. And they just want real estate in a newspaper where someone will say,
arguing on their behalf.
Well, someone will just say, hey, affordable drugs that save your life or the lives of people you know and love. That might sound good, but what if it weren't?
Yeah. And the thing is that, and whenever she's doing this, she's invoking a real argument, and it is a kind of a straw man thing. And I think she could argue, well, when you talk about the way people talk about things, they really only emphasize the positives and not the trade-offs. It's like, yeah, that's what literally everyone does in politics. You're acting like that's some sort of cheating demagoguery when leftists do it. Literally everyone fucking does that. But yes, of course there are fucking cost benefit. Of course there's trade-offs. There have to be for everything. But her assumption is whatever we do, the trade-offs, they're all in the context where there are these disgusting, fat, blood-filled tick parasites who are sucking off everyone else so that their kids can go to clown college. Their profits are sacrosanct. Like whatever we're doing in terms of trading off a bloated, disgusting corporate sector of capitalist profiteers, that's built in. That can't go anywhere. Like Joe Manchin, shithead daughter, all the Sacklers, they have to be kept whole. They cannot lose their standard of living. They cannot lose their 15th yacht.
Not even their standard of living. They can't even take a minor haircut.
Nothing. They can't lose anything.
Yeah.
And that, I just think that that's a very faulty assumption, to say the least. And it's funny how she doesn't, and she never really puts it that way, of course, because nobody would accept it. But like, look at that article. She's talking about the incentive to produce. Well, who makes the money? It's not the guys who make the fucking disease-changing drugs. It's the guys who sell them. It's the fucking companies that sell them that make the money. The people who actually do the life-saving research, they cannot be motivated by the thought of, oh my God, I'm going to be a billionaire, because they never become billionaires. Their fucking bosses do.
And like so much of like economic theory, like the way, I mean, like when I say Megan isn't human, I would say like most of the economics profession, like as a discipline, is also deeply inhuman in that it's this weird overlap with like evolutionary biology where they assume individual human beings are these like just rational computing machines that are always making decisions based on their like genetic outcome. And they generally they think like altruism generally doesn't exist, or it only extends so far as like your immediate blood group, and that everyone is capable of making these choices like a computer, like nodes and kind of an algorithm, which just based on any human experience outside of the realm of economics is untrue.
Yes.
And here's the thing, economics creates that world by which we literally are all competing with one another to fucking my getting prescription drugs comes at the expense of everyone else, or like things like that, where it makes this robotic, inhuman world. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And here's the other way that it's bullshit. The assumption there is everyone is motivated by personal interest, and not even that, specifically financial
capitalist financial interest, investment.
And that's why people create life-saving drugs. Well, as we've said, the people who actually create life-saving drugs are scientists and doctors. And I can say categorically, they are not motivated by becoming billionaires. Why? Because they became scientists instead of becoming pharmaceutical executives. If they cared about money, they wouldn't have that job. They would have the job in the fucking C-suites. So clearly there are people in the world who want to help other people. And capitalism exists, it's supposed to be the thing that directs resources, right? Like efficiently. That's the argument of capitalism. Yeah. It's the most efficient way to direct resources. And that might have some validity in certain like consumer markets, but in something as vital and as inelastic as fucking healthcare and medicine, it's simply not true. We know where the resources should go. We know what we need to do. And we have people who want to work on those things. We could just direct the money that way. We do not need this parasitic class directing the money in a way that guarantees that they are always compensated and that people, because of that, die because you create the artificial scarcity of elevated price points to limit the number of people who can access the drug.
I would say at the end of the day, economics, like as a discipline, is largely created and maintained by people who hate humanity.
Mm-hmm.
They have a fundamental contempt for human beings or humanity as a concept. And like they wish to exist only as individuals in competition, ruthless competition with everyone else. And they cannot conceive of a world in which that is not the case. And they are in fact creating one in which it is. So Megan McArdle, once again, probably the greatest all-star in Chapo history. Campus security was not called, unlike the Grenfell episode, but you know, we've got chiller vibes now. We're on the Marianne.
Yeah,
trip.
exactly. Ever since Marianne came into my life, I just can't get as angry as I used to.
Well, I hope it will not affect the quality of the show. I think that just about does it for this week.
Mm-hmm.
So till next time, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.